8th District Congressman Reid Ribble of Appleton is a Republican finishing his first term. Congressman, thanks very much for stopping into Wisconsin tonight to talk about, it's a historic time in America. It's a historical election year. Thank you so much.
Welcome. I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
It's been a couple of years since we talked.
It is. I remember we were up at St. Norbert.
Yes, we were.
So
finish this sentence. So in 2010, the successful roofing company executive gets elected, goes to Washington, and finds.
Well, I found a mess. I mean, and I don't know that we've made a whole lot of progress on fixing it, to be honest with you. It's you know, when you're in the business world, you can make decisions at 8 in the morning, and by 8:30, people are already executing. And here, you know, for good, I believe for good, our founders established a system that requires consensus building. Mm-hmm. And so when you have a divided Congress and you have a divided, the Congress is divided from the executive branch, finding consensus has been difficult because it requires each side to be able to move a little bit, to have a certain amount of pragmatism to find that place. And I think as I've watched politics over the course of my life, the side that is usually complaining about no bipartisanship is the side in the minority. I know as Republicans, we complained about it when we were in the minority during 9 and 10,
yes.
And now the Democrats are complaining about it now that they're in the minority, because you need to have the majority move your way a little bit if you're going to find it. It's been my contention that we ought to be looking for the things we agree on. I'll never forget the first State of the Union address I was at, and shortly after I was sworn into office, I chose to go into the chamber with a blank piece of paper and just write down the things that the president said that I agreed with. Mm-hmm. And the reason I did that is because why talk about the things you disagree with at this point? If we have agreement on some things,
work through those.
Let's just do that. You know, that's not terribly complicated. Let's work on that. But everything is political in Washington, and so people want credit. And if you're in a place where you have to have credit for something, then it makes it difficult to find consensus.
What do you consider your biggest victory in the first 2 years?
Yeah.
You put out press releases saying I've been able to do this, but what do you consider your biggest success?
I think probably my biggest victory was working with two colleagues of mine, Mick Mulvaney from South Carolina and Jason Chaffetz from Utah, to write Cut, Cap, and Balance. And I realized that it was a controversial piece of legislation, but it did pass the House in bipartisan support. Mm-hmm. And basically what Cut, Cap, and Balance did, we had that vote shortly before the increase of the nation's debt limit last July. And we were trying to find a solution. How can we protect our country's credit rating and get us on a glide path towards sustainable economic spending and balance sheet, try to get the nation balance sheet fixed. Right. And so what we thought we would do is we would establish a certain percentage of cutting in the first year. It was $111 billion, roughly 2%, mm-hmm. that we would cut in the first year. And then every year thereafter, for a period of 10 years, we'd cut roughly 0.5% of the nation's GDP to get spending over the course of a decade back in line with its historical norms. And then finally, the third was the balance part, where once we got to structural balance, then we would call on a constitutional amendment to reinforce it and sustain it. I believe had the Senate acted on that piece of legislation, had the president signed it into law, we would have avoided the nation's credit downgrade, and we would have had the country for the first time in my lifetime on a trajectory for a balanced budget going forward to secure the future for the next generation.
But that was a non-starter in the Senate, which is controlled by Democrats.
That's correct. It was tabled in the Senate and was never voted on. So it's still there. They could bring it up.
Right.
Yeah.
What strikes me is now we're in a discussion of what you've heard the term, maybe it's, is it a fair term? We're looking at a fiscal cliff on January 1, where this cobbled together package last year says we're going to inflict, well, unless it's changed, massive debts in the military and domestic spending. Now, there's going to be no resolution of this before the November 5 election. I guess my question is, can a lame duck Congress come back and take us back from the brink of this fiscal cliff in the 2 months after the November election?
I don't know that the Congress can, but the American people can. And see, that's the power of the election. And I think that's what we have to rely on, that the American people, who are always smarter than the political class, always smarter than the political class.
That's you, because you're now a member of the political class.
Yeah, I know
right?
that. I completely understand that. And if at any time we stop listening to the citizens of this country, we've got a problem.
Yeah.
Because they